All right, folks, welcome on back to the College Super Picks podcast. Today I'm joined by a very special guest. That is my friend Isaac Zimmerman, my very good friend. Isaac, good to hear your voice, man. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hey, Ethan. I'm a huge college football fan and football in general. And me and Ethan met at a sports broadcasting camp over the summer back in June. And we've been texting about college football nonstop ever since. So glad to be here.
Awesome. Okay, so without further ado, let's get right into it. Starting off with our number 30 best game this weekend. That is going to be the battle for the Land Grant Trophy. Rank 11 Penn State goes on the road to face the Michigan State Spartans. They are 21-point favorites with a 95% chance of winning. Let's go over to Isaac to see who he's got.
It's a neutral site game, so it's going to be at Ford Field. And just with the way Penn State has been playing really good football, with their only losses to the two best teams in the Big Ten, number 2 and 3 team in the country, Ohio State and Michigan. And they're both pretty close. And Michigan State has just not been having their kind of year so far. They just have not had a great year, been losing to teams that they shouldn't lose to. So I'm going to go with Penn State here.
All right, yeah, I'm going to have to second that and say I'm going to go with Penn State big in this one. They might not give up a touchdown in this game. Michigan State's offense is withered by the transfer portal this year. They really got an unlucky draw losing Keon Coleman, and that's something that's really hurt them. Drew Aller has only thrown one interception this year. That's why he is listed as my impact player on this Penn State offense. I've got the Nittany Lions big in this game. Okay, so moving on to number 29, Boston College is bowl eligible, as is Miami. So Miami's going to head into Eagle territory, still 10-point favorites with a 78% chance of winning. 6-5 for both these teams, trying to get a 7th win to jump them up into a better bowl game. Let's go over to Isaac to see who he's got.
So looking at their schedule, I noticed that Miami has played, so far they've played 4 games on the road, and they've only won one of those games, and that was at Temple. So that's not a great win. But then all their losses were really good. They lost to Florida State, NC State, and North Carolina. So those are some quality losses there. Tough places to play on the road. But with that being said, I think Van Dyke is just he's gonna have one of his better games. Even though he's inconsistent lately, I think he's just gonna have one of his better games. And I'm gonna go with Miami 28-17.
Yeah, so speaking of Tyler Van Dyke, he has had an up and down season, got up into my Heisman list at some point in their early weeks, but since then he has had more interceptions than he has had touchdowns. Obviously, it wasn't his fault that they lost that game to Georgia Tech, just terrible clock management. That was all Mario Cristobal. But still hasn't had a great year. So I'm going to go with Miami here. I think it'll be pretty close. I'm going to say Miami's got this one 31-21, a high-scoring kind of game. But Boston College, they've been a little surprising this year. They just don't have the names that Miami does. Moving onward to number 28, we got another rivalry, and that's Farmageddon between Iowa State and Kansas State. The Wildcats are ranked 19th in the country, favored by 10 points. They've got an 84.5% chance of winning this one. They're ranked in the top 20 once again. The Wildcats gunning for a really highly rated bowl game. What will the Cyclones say about that one?
Yeah, I think Iowa State is one of the better teams in the Big 12, although that's not saying too much because they have some really bad teams in there. But I must say that they're up there as towards the top. But Kansas State at home this year has been undefeated they've been unstoppable at home. They've been playing really good football, looking like one of the best teams in the country at home. And so I think that's going to be a bit too much with that K-State crowd at Bill Snyder Family Stadium. And I think they're going to take the win 35-20 over Iowa State.
Yeah, Isaac, one thing about Kansas State is they have an interesting offense with quarterback Will Howard has been very good this year, but they've also had the true freshman Avery Johnson come in and scramble for almost 300 yards. They have a very, very good running back room as well. So I've got the Wildcats in this one, 34-20. Very, very similar scores there. So number 27, moving up our games list, BYU has been on a skid the past few weeks. Can they get things going once again on the road against ranked Oklahoma State? Doesn't seem so, as the Cowboys are favored by 17 with an 82% chance of winning this one. Isaac, let us know your pick.
So with this game being in Stillwater, ever since the blowout loss to South Alabama that Oklahoma State had 33-7, they have been a pretty good football team. They find themselves ranked number 21, I believe, and they've been a pretty good football team. They've had some bad games, like the UCF game, but at home they're 5-1, with undefeated aside from that blowout loss to South Alabama. While BYU has only won one game on the road, and that was the 38-31 loss or win over Arkansas. So with that being said, I think Oklahoma State takes this one 27-21 at home.
Yeah, so Oklahoma State, neither of these offenses have been in the upper half of the Big 12 this year. Ollie Gordon at Oklahoma State is the entire offense there. You may recognize the name of senior Alan Bowman, who started at Texas Tech all the way back in 2018 through 2020, then sat on the bench at Michigan. He's been a pleasant surprise, but it's really been all Ollie Gordon. BYU's been withered by some injuries. We've seen Aiden Robbins go out for a while. We've seen Caden Slovis go out. Slovis is healthy for this one, but I've got Oklahoma State winning 31-17. And moving onward to another rivalry game, the battle for the Land of Lincoln Trophy between Northwestern and Illinois. The Fighting Illini are 5.5-point favorites, and they've got a 59% chance of winning this one.
Yeah, Illinois has to win this game if they want to keep their season alive, trying to get that 6th win to go bowling. They want it real bad. Northwestern, a bit of a surprise this season, being bowl eligible at 6-5. And this game being in Illinois, with Northwestern being 1-4 on the road, they've had almost all their wins at home. And I think with Illinois being the home team here, I think they're going to pull it out just barely, 21-17, which is my final with Illinois winning.
Yeah, this one's going to be ugly. Neither of these offenses really impress me at all, but one thing is the Illinois defensive line was something I had circled from the beginning of this year, led by Jerzon Newton, who's guaranteed to be a first-round pick. He could be an NFL star. He's led this Illinois defense throughout the season, almost pulled off an upset over Iowa. They're going to get that 6th win today, barely. Neither team's going to score 20 points. I've got a low-scoring match, Big Ten West style in the rivalry game. Illinois is going to win this one 3. So, moving onward, the best game in the Conference USA, possibly this entire season, New Mexico State with their heads held higher than ever in program history after going to Jordan-Hare Stadium and getting a 31-10 win, silencing every Auburn fan in the country. New Mexico State, I think they've been on a crazy streak right now, going up against Jacksonville State. Jacksonville State, another pleasant surprise in their first year. They've had a great season. They're favored by 2.5. New Mexico State, though, has a 53% chance of winning. Who you got?
Yeah, New Mexico State, as you said, they're coming off of one of the biggest wins in school history, 31-10 win over Auburn in Auburn after being down by 33. So they're coming off of a huge win like that, and they have not lost at home since the opening week, even though it was against UMass. They've been really good since at home. Zion Webb is named the starter for this game for Jacksonville State. He's 5-3 so far in the season. And another thing I want to point out is Pavia, the quarterback for New Mexico State, has also been leading the team in rushing yards with 738, and with his passing yards almost 2,500. He's probably going to get that this game. I think New Mexico State is going to pull it out 31-27.
Yeah, you mentioned Diego Pavia. He is also leading the team in rushing. I had that on my notes. That's something we didn't really see from him last year. He's already blown his total passing yards out of the water from last year. He's been one of my most improved quarterbacks in the league right now. He is gunning for a Conference USA Offensive Player of the Year award. Obviously, Western Kentucky's Austin Reed is still in that conversation, but their win-loss total hasn't had that same charm as New Mexico State's has. That being said, I think Jacksonville State goes into New Mexico State. The Aggies have their heads held higher than ever before, coming off of the biggest win in program history, and they drop this one to end the year. Jacksonville State on a game-winning field goal shocks the New Mexico State Aggies, and they finish the year with a record of 9-3 in their first year in the FBS. San Jose State and UNLV in what's possibly the best Mountain West matchup right now this week. One thing I'm going to say about this game is San Jose State, they're coming off some big wins. They have been a lot better recently than they were at the beginning of the year. UNLV still favored by 2.5 with a 57.7% chance of winning. Let's go over to Isaac once again, see who he's got in this game.
So yeah, you said that they have finished the year a lot better than they started. I had that on my notes as they started 1-5 and are now ball 6-5 with a 5-game win streak. Going into UNLV, who has been surprisingly really good this year, coming off of a win against Air Force, and they're also undefeated at home. And this is going to be a really low scoring. It's going to be both teams have had low turnovers this year. With Jaden Mayava having thrown 6 INTs only as a freshman, and Chevin Cordero has only thrown 4. So I think that these offenses, it's going to be a pretty somewhat high scoring game, and I have UNLV winning this one 34-28.
Yeah, you mentioned UNLV's quarterback, Mayava. He is only a true freshman, as you said. He has been one of the biggest surprises on this team. Doug Brumfield was there to start this year. They lost to Michigan. And Mayava came in, and they scored 40 points in 5 consecutive games. The Rebels, their offense is a machine right now. Then you got Chevin Cordero on the other side. He's a 6th-year senior, transferred in from Hawaii, then finished a finalist for the Mountain West Offensive Player of the Year last year in what was an incredibly surprising year from him. Again, like you said, low turnovers, high touchdowns on both these quarterbacks. This is going to be a high-scoring game, 70-plus points. I've got UNLV winning this one on a last-minute game-winning drive. We're going to take a break from the group of 5 for a second, move on to number 23, and that's one of the biggest rivalries in all of college football. This may be the last time that it's played for a while. The Apple Cup between Washington State and Washington. Washington State, they're kind of in a terrible spot. They're basically conferenceless right now as it stands for next year. Washington, they got their way into the Big Ten. They're on top of the world right now at number 4. and they're looking like they're going to win this one with a 16.5 point. They're minus 16.5, 88.7% chance of winning this one. Michael Penix Jr. is just one of the best quarterbacks in the league right now.
Yeah, you mentioned that this is probably going to be the last one for a while. I think it was either today or yesterday they extended that rivalry through 2028, which I'm very happy about. But I feel like since that 2021 victory from Washington State at Washington when they still in the field, Washington's been a completely different team. I feel like they've been hungry to get wins, especially here in the Apple Cup. And Michael Penix, he's been my favorite to win the Heisman for most of the year. And with all of that he's done for Washington, I think Washington will win this game pretty easily. 41-25 is my prediction.
Yeah, so the thing about Wazoo is they were ranked inside the top 15, had some huge wins. Then they went on the longest losing streak in the Power 5 outside of Vanderbilt. So Cam Ward, he was, again, up there in my Heisman list at some point. If his team was ranked higher, if he had a better record, he would still be there. He is a very good quarterback. Obviously, he's in the Pac-12, which is just a great spot for quarterbacks this year. But if we're going to talk about quarterbacks in this game, how can we not talk about Michael Penix? He has been everything the Huskies wanted and so much more since he transferred in from Indiana. His receiving corps has been a lot of that success. They are very, very good, led by Rome Odunze, who is going to be a top 5, top 3, maybe top 2 wide receiver in next year's wide receiver class for the NFL draft. Anyways, let's get to it. Washington covers in this one. Washington State's got their heads held high after a huge win over Colorado. They're going to lose and get eliminated from bowl contention. Sticking with the theme of the Pac-12, we're going to go over to the Rumble in the Rockies. This is the first time in over 2 years that the Utah Utes are not ranked inside the top 25. The Colorado Buffaloes, they aren't in a good spot either, as they're not even playing for a bowl game right now. Deion Sanders' boys are 4-7 after an embarrassing loss. Utah's 22-point favorites, one of the more lopsided games we've got on here. Let's make this one quick. Isaac, who you got?
Yeah, Colorado, after that start that they have really just fallen off. Shedeur Sanders has been playing well, but not like he did in the beginning there. And Utah, playing at home, has been really good, with their only loss being to Oregon, even though it was a blowout. But yeah, I got the Utes here, 34-21.
I couldn't agree more. Utah at home is a scary, scary team. They absolutely manhandled the Florida Gators in their first game of the year, which is a time of year when you see a lot of teams kind of getting sloppy at home, but not the Utes. They've been great all year, aside from that Oregon game, of course. They've been really good, obviously not in the top 25, but they could very well end the season there. They're very happy for the future as Cam Rising is coming back next year, assuming he doesn't transfer out. I doubt he will. Either way, the Utah Utes are going to win this one big. Shedeur Sanders is held by that Utah defense to under 20 points, 38-17. Big 12 conference play is concluding as Texas plays their final regular season game as a member of the Big 12. And what other game would it be than the battle for the Chancellor's Spurs, as the 7th-ranked team in the nation goes on the road to Texas Tech. 14-point favorites, 86.3% chance of winning. Isaac, who is your pick for this game? Texas Tech get another win and finish 7-5.
Yeah, I know Texas Tech wants this one real bad. They want to ruin Texas's dream season here in the final week of the regular season. And a player I'm keeping my eyes on is Taj Brooks with 1,352 rushing yards going up against one of the best D-lines, if not the best D-line in the country, in the Texas Longhorns. I think that's going to be a really good matchup between him and the D-line. But also with that D-line, they might force Texas Tech to throw the ball a lot more, which is something that they have not been doing all season. They've really just been giving the ball to Brooks there. But I think that they might have to be forced to throw a little more than they usually do. With that being said, I think Texas D-line will be a little too much for Taj Brooks and the Tech offense, and I think Texas comes away with this one, 34-17.
Yeah, as I said, if Texas Tech wins this one, it's going to be the heart, not the talent. They've had this game circled all year long. They were looking so far ahead from week 1 when they lost to Wyoming. They've come a long way. They were able to upset Kansas. They've had some good wins. They've had some bad losses. This one will top it off and solidify them as those good wins were the real us. Like you said, Taj Brooks. You think of Texas Tech in their glory days as a air raid offense, and handing it off to the running back was a foreign thing. They have turned over this Texas Tech team into a running juggernaut with Taj Brooks. On the other side, Texas has Jonathan Brooks, who has 1,100 rushing yards this year. He has really taken the weight off of Quinn Ewers' shoulders for a lot of the season and allowed him to mature into a really good quarterback. News came out that Ewers is returning for next year to play in the SEC. This is some of the reason is that Jonathan Brooks has been such a force that Ewers can rely on in this offense. Again, a lot of heart in this game. I don't like either of these teams, but I think Texas Tech beats the spread but comes up just short. I've got the Longhorns 38-28 in a shootout. Well, we talked about the Rumble and the Rockies 2 spots ago. Now we're going to talk about the duel in the desert between Arizona and Arizona State. Arizona has been one of the most surprising teams this year with 4 ranked wins. That is more than anyone else in all of college football. Arizona State, one of the most disappointing teams in college football this year. They are 3-8, and their quarterback room, which seemed to be pretty deep, like 3 very solid guys deep, all 3 of them have not exceeded expectations and have failed to meet them. Isaac, this one should be pretty quick. Tell me who you got.
Yeah, Ethan, as you were saying, they're a very surprised team. In the college pick'em, the first few ranked wins, I had them losing. I was like, why is Arizona on here? They have not. They've been bad these past few years, and I did not realize until like the second one that I realized, wait, they're a good team. So I started picking them. I've been winning those games, but Arizona State at home has been terrible. They've been getting blown out. Even against the good teams, they still got to at least make it a fight at the beginning, keep the home crowd in it, but they've been terrible at home. So I don't think that has anything to do with the way that this game will end. So I got Arizona 38-17.
Yeah, I hinted at what I'm about to start talking about for a second is the Arizona State quarterback room, and that is Drew Pine, the transfer from Notre Dame, who I had in my top 50 quarterbacks. He got benched early. He's battled injury. He hasn't been any good. Trenton Bourguet, who came in reserve for Emory Jones early on last year for Arizona State and ended up being top 5 in the Power 5 in completion percentage. He currently is the starter for this game, but he has more interceptions than touchdowns. Then, to top it all off, Jalen Rashada, one of the highest-rated quarterbacks in the recruiting class, probably the highest-rated recruit to ever come to Arizona State, he hasn't been good either. He's started a few games, and they've been blown out in each and every one of them. So, again, this is going to be a huge win for Arizona. Big rivalry. I think the Wildcats come in and they win this one 35-13. Inside the top 20 games to watch this weekend, I'm going to focus on Maryland and Rutgers, 2 6-5 Big Ten teams. Rutgers is on a bit of a skid. Maryland, with Talia Tagovailoa at quarterback. Obviously, you recognize the last name being Tua's brother. Maryland, 1-point favorites, 54% chance of winning. This is a close game. Isaac, who you got winning this one?
Yeah, I know that we've both been pretty high on Maryland since the beginning, and they started off really good at 5-0. But since then, they've been playing some good teams, and they have not been playing as good, even whenever they played the bad teams, like they lost to Northwestern. And I think that will be a huge problem against Rutgers, because Rutgers has only one loss at home, and it was against Ohio State, and they still played really well in that game. So I'm going to have Rutgers beating Maryland with a final score of 27-24.
Wow. Yeah, I don't know why, but I'm just not on the Rutgers bandwagon. I look at their offense and I see one player. That's Kyle Monangai. He is their running back. He's got almost 1,000 rushing yards. Quarterback Gavin Wimsatt had a bad year last year. Didn't play into the hype, which wasn't much, but he still didn't play into it. This year, he really hasn't done it either. I look at the Rutgers offense and I look at the Maryland offense. I see Talia Tagovailoa. I see Roman Hemby on that Maryland offense, and I say, this is going to be a blowout. The Rutgers defense does have the advantage here over the Maryland offense. I think they're going to keep this one a little low scoring, but I'm going to have to disagree with you. I got the Terps 28-17. They're going to go into Rutgers. They're going to go to New Jersey, and they're going to have a big win. Finish the year 7-5. They're going to jump up to get a highly rated bowl game. Rutgers is going to fall down, finish the year 6-6. Well, we talked about a Pac-12 matchup about 6 spots ago. Here's another one. Air Force on a bad, like one of the, you look at it, it's one of the worst losing streaks college football teams are in right now. Air Force, they've kind of fallen off a little bit. Boise State has been rising up. Quarterback Taylon Green hasn't been what they thought he was going to be. He was one of the better freshmen in college football last year as a redshirt freshman. Boise State, they're 7-point favorites. They got a 68.7% chance of winning this one. If this game was played 4 weeks ago, Air Force, they would be big favorites, but they've fallen down quite a bit. Can they get back up? Isaac, let us know.
Yeah, as you said, Air Force has had a bad losing streak. Even though it was just 3 games, they got killed by Army. They lost by 2 touchdowns to Hawaii, and then they lost to UNLV, which is not a terrible loss, but the other 2 were terrible. With Boise State, they've averaged 32 points per game this year, and their only home loss was to UCF, a Power 5 school. And like you said, a few weeks ago, I would have picked Air Force for sure. But Boise State, I think they, with their offense, I think they pull it out with the win 31-27.
Yeah, this Boise State offense is just so good. Ashton Jeanty, as a true freshman last year, came in kind of, he came into Boise State. Their running back, George Holani, he'd already had 3 years of starting under his belt. He was the key to this offense. And Ashton Jeanty came in, and he shared that running back role with him. And now he's passed him up on the depth chart and become one of the best running backs in the group of 5. He's got a ton of receiving yards this year, which I really like in a running back, especially in an offense that has a good, big, strong-arm quarterback like Taylon Green. Boise State, like you said, they've scored a ton of points this year. Another thing is this Air Force defense has been really, really good. They're about 5 guys deep that have just crazy tackle numbers. Trey Taylor, their free safety, was one of my favorite defensive players in the group of 5 to start this year. Anyway, so what it's shaping up to be is Boise State has an obvious advantage on offense. I like the option offense at Air Force, but it can't compete with Boise State. Air Force has an obvious advantage on defense. So what I think it's going to come down to is simply home field advantage. I've got the Boise State Broncos winning it on the blue field, 24-21. Sticking with the Western theme, we're going to head on over to another rivalry game, another one that may not be played for a little while, and that is two teams that are moving conferences, California and UCLA. The Bruins are 9-point favorites with a 73.2% chance of winning. Isaac, in this rivalry game, it's in Pasadena. Who do you think is going to win this one, and who might have the bragging rights for a couple of years?
Yeah, both these teams have had very inconsistent seasons, with UCLA had a terrible loss at home against Arizona State, losing 17-7 a few weeks back. And California started the year off horribly. That 14-10 loss to Auburn is a pretty bad loss. But with UCLA's defense only allowing an average of 16 points per game, I feel like they have, and being at home, I feel like that they're going to pull it out with the win over Cal, 35-24.
Yeah, UCLA's defense, you mentioned them. Liatu Latu is kind of that entire defense. He reminds me of like a Micah Parsons. He's massive, but he can drop back into coverage even as an edge rusher and make some plays. That's why he's currently listed as a top 10 NFL draft prospect, and that's why UCLA is having so much success. Again, freshman Dante Moore, who was the number 3 quarterback in this past recruiting class, he hasn't had the same success that we expected him to have. He's not a scrambler. He's a pocket passing quarterback, so you expect him to kind of come out the gate and show a lot of awareness and not throw that many interceptions, but the interception count has definitely been concerning for Dante Moore. And so Ethan Garbers has come in, and he has been really, really good lately. Just came off of a huge win on the road against USC, by far their biggest win this year, outplaying Caleb Williams by quite a bit. So for that reason, I've got the Bruins in this one by 11 points, 35-24. Another group of 5 matchup, a couple of teams that have joined the FBS semi-recently, and 2 teams that, since joining, have had immediate, impactful success. Those are the James Madison Dukes and the Coastal Carolina Chanticleers. James Madison, they were on top of the world until last week when they lost at home to Appalachian State. They're in a battle with the NCAA right now. They want to get into a bowl. Hopefully they will, because they're a fun team to watch. They're 8-point favorites, 56% chance of winning. Who you got in this one, Isaac?
Yeah, I'd agree with you. I think that they should definitely go bowling with how good they've been this year. I think that they deserve to be in a bowl game. And this is only their second year since joining a FBS conference. And some could argue that they are the best in the Power 5 right now. They're not Power 5, Group of 5. And it's either them or Tulane. But they're, like you said, they're a very fun team to watch. It's been fun watching them this year in their second year in FBS. Well, James Madison, that Appalachian State loss was at home. So they're undefeated on the road going into Conway. These are both 2 really good offenses and 2 really good defenses. And with James Madison's rushing defense, they only allow like 62 rushing yards per game on average. So I think I'm going to be going with James Madison here with a final score of 38-24.
Yeah, you mentioned this James Madison defense. It's pretty mind-boggling how many sacks they have put up this year. You Torres Jones, Mikael Kamara, they are, again, 5 names deep in guys that have just put up insane numbers of TFLs. They've had more sacks than my Texas A&M Aggies this year, and we're currently pretty much at the top of that statistic. But another thing about James Madison is quarterback Jordan McLeod. What a story. Didn't play at all in 2022 with his second team, Arizona. Sat behind Jaden Delara and Noah Fafita, who are currently very, very good quarterbacks. So he transfers to James Madison, where he has immediately become the captain of this offense. He's got an incredible rushing attack, strong arm. He just makes plays. Like when you watch him play, the awareness that he has when guys are running at him like they're JMU defensive linemen is very impressive. But something about the teal field, something about the offense that they got down in Conway, Grayson McCall, 3 consecutive Sun Belt Offensive Player of the Year awards is something you cannot ignore. Talk about teams that just make plays. Like Braden Bennett, you watched one of the best plays in college football last year. They're at the 30-yard line, and he just hurdles a man and sprints to the end zone. These are 2 teams of athletes right here these are 2 teams that don't have group of 5 rosters. Both these teams could go up in a big game. This is going to be one of the best games to watch. But I've got the Coastal Carolina team catching James Madison off guard. JMU's kind of distracted by this whole bowling thing. And I think Coastal Carolina is going to come from behind and stun them 31-28. Another quick one. The number 1 team in the nation is going on the road to face a Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets team that is bowl eligible in a famous rivalry, clean old-fashioned hate between Georgia and Georgia Tech. The Bulldogs are 24-point favorites with a 93% chance of winning this one.
Yeah, with Georgia going to this game with 28 winning streak, and I think that I don't even remember the last time Georgia Tech beat them. But with Georgia Tech, they're a road team. They are not very good at home. They've lost to Bowling Green at home. They lost to Boston College at home. And I really just don't see how they can win this against the number 1 team in the country with the way Georgia's defense has been playing as usual. But their offense this year has been electric. They've had, with Carson Beck having 21 touchdowns this year compared to only 5 interceptions. And Brock Bowers, even after missing a few games, has almost gotten 700 yards, and he has 6 touchdowns. So I think Georgia wins this one, 45-20.
Yeah, how about Brock Bowers? Even though he's missed a few games, he still leads the number 1 team in the country in receiving yards, and he's not even a wide receiver. He's so fast for his position. It's really stunning. Either way, Georgia's going to win this one. One thing is, Haynes King and Chase Lane, former Texas A&M Aggies, those 2 guys are going to ball out in this one. I've got Georgia winning, though, 38-14. The Georgia defense is going to show up once again and pave their way to another national championship appearance. One of the longest-going rivalries at the Power 5 level is the battle for Paul Bunyan's axe, all the way up north between Wisconsin and Minnesota. Both these teams have taken a step back from last season. Minnesota was at 9-4 last year. Obviously, they're always just kind of that extra team in the Big Ten West that never really goes to the conference championship, but they always end up with a good win-loss record. Either way, Wisconsin, 2.5-point favorites. They've dropped some games they shouldn't have. Can they get back on track in this one?
Yeah, Wisconsin has been one of the most disappointing teams this year. With the new quarterback and Tanner Mordecai, this is the definition of a Big Ten West offense because they have been bad this year. He's had 4 touchdowns all year compared to 3 interceptions. And Minnesota, like you said, trying to fight for bowl eligibility. There is no way that they would want more than this to become bowl eligible than to beat Wisconsin at home. I mean, in Minnesota. So that's, with that riding on them, I think I'm going to be going, I think that they're still going to lose. But in a very low scoring game, I think Wisconsin pulls it out 21-13.
Yeah, I don't know what it is, but I have been picking Wisconsin all year long, and I keep being wrong. No matter who it is, I keep picking them, and they keep losing. So, Tanner Mordecai, of course, he's also missed a few games. They've had Braden Locke in there. Braylon Allen is hurt. Chesma Lucy is hurt. It'll be a game-time decision whether or not Braylon Allen comes in, and that's going to be basically the game-deciding decision right there. The thing about Wisconsin is their defense heavily regressed this offseason. That's something not a lot of people talked about because they got so many more weapons on offense, like Tanner Mordecai. But their offense has been what's keeping them from winning games, and that's what's really holding them back. And for that reason, I've got Minnesota winning this one, 27-24, finding their way to a bowl game at 6-6, and winning Paul Bunyan's axe. We're going to keep talking about defense because we are at the 13th best game to watch this weekend, and that's the Heroes game between Iowa and Nebraska. The Hawkeyes are currently ranked 17th in the nation. Quarterback Deacon Hill, I can't say he's filled in well with the absence of Cade McNamara, but he's winning games. His defense is doing their job, and Iowa is scoring not many points, but they're still winning. So they're favored in this one, percentage-wise, with a 61% chance of winning. However, Nebraska is favored by 2.5 points. Isaac, obviously this is a really close game. Who you got winning this one?
Yeah, I think that Iowa, with their defense, they've allowed 12.5 points per game on average. That's the third best in FBS right now, behind the number 2 and 3 Ohio State and Michigan. This is only their 4th road game on the year. They're 2-1, with their only loss being to Penn State. So with that being said, I think they're going to come in Nebraska, which is a tough place to play. But I think that with their defense, they're going to win it 17-7.
Yeah, the thing is, Iowa, they basically live off tight ends on their offense. Like, Deacon Hill has not put up a great stat line, but in Lincoln, Nebraska, it is just a different place there. If this was in Iowa, this would be a totally different story. But in Lincoln, Nebraska, it's such a different atmosphere. This is one of the best football atmospheres in the Big Ten West. I'd rank it second if you left it up to me. Obviously, the offense, there's not much to like. Leading receiver is Billy Kemp IV, transfer from Virginia. He's a sixth-year senior. Quarterback Heinrich Harburg has not filled in well for Jeff Sims, who had kind of the worst possible season. People were saying he was a dark horse Heisman candidate. He comes out and throws 1 touchdown and 6 interceptions before getting injured. Running back Anthony Grant isn't much to like either. So, that being said, this is going to be an ugly game. But because of the atmosphere in Lincoln, Nebraska, I've got the Cornhuskers winning this one in a historic 10-9 fashion. The Cornhuskers win. They get the Heroes Game trophy, and they spoil Iowa's hopes of a 10-win season. Back to Big 12 conference play after 3 consecutive fun rivalry games. TCU, the Horned Frogs, they need a win to go bowling. Your Horned Frogs, Isaac, going on the road to Oklahoma. It couldn't get much tougher for the Frogs. Oklahoma is currently ranked 13. Their 10-point favorites haven't been playing as good football lately. Could they slip up and lose to TCU.
Yeah, as you mentioned, TCU, that's my team. It's been a rough year watching them. They're a very inconsistent team. They will follow up a 42-17 win with a 42-3 loss. And it's just been, I can't figure out the offense or the defense. Are they good? Are they not good? It's just a very confusing year. And with them going to Oklahoma, at TCU is 1-3 on the road this year, with their only win being at Houston. This is going to be a tough environment as Oklahoma's undefeated at home. TCU did have a really good game against Baylor last week with Josh Hoover. He had probably the best game that he will have, at least in these next few years. Going 24 for 29, throwing for 2 touchdowns and 412 yards. And Jared Wiley, I think he was the Big 12 Player of the Week this week. He had 178 yards and both of Josh Hoover's touchdowns. They just kept finding him on the seam, and he kept scoring. And that's the best game he's played in his whole career. And that was a fun game. But with Oklahoma's defense, I think that at Oklahoma takes this one 34-21.
Oklahoma, Dylan Gabriel has done something with a wide receiving core that has regressed from last year and a running back group that has regressed from last year. And he has turned them from a 6-7 team into the number 13 team in the nation, hoping to get into the Big 12 championship. Aside from that, TCU's defense has been very disappointing this year. Josh Newton is still a very highly rated NFL prospect, but that's pretty much all they've got going. I think the Sooners have a high-scoring win, 41-24. At number 11 is the Palmetto Bowl between Clemson and South Carolina, one of the best non-conference rivalries out there. Clemson, they're back into the rankings, 3 straight wins. They're 7-4, 7.5-point favorites with a 65% chance of winning. Cade Klubnik versus Spencer Rattler.
Yeah, with it being at South Carolina's only loss, they've only had one loss at home this year, and it was to Florida by 2 points. But with that being said, the best team that they've beaten at home was probably Kentucky, and it was only a 3-point win. So they haven't played very good opponents at home. Clemson being 1-3 on the road, with their only they beat Syracuse on the road, 31-14 blowout fashion. But their other 3 games on the road were NC State, which they lost by 7, Miami, which they lost by 8 in double overtime, and Duke, which they got killed, but that was back when Duke they were a legit team. They were rising up the polls, and they had a healthy starting quarterback. So with that being said, with how good of opponents that they've had on the road and how close those losses, 2 to 3 of losses have been, I think they beat South Carolina 29-20.
Yeah, we talked about this game a year ago, and Clemson wants nothing more than to win this game. They know South Carolina's out of it. South Carolina, they haven't had the same year as last year. Spencer Rattler's been good. Juice Wells has been injured. Xavier Legette has stepped up and been very solid, but they got beat by the transfer portal. Jaheim Bell went to Florida State. Their other running back, he left for USC. They haven't had the same season as last year, and I think that's going to show as Cade Klubnik is going to go into Williams-Brice Stadium, and he is going to beat the Gamecocks by 10 points, 34-24. Spencer Rattler has been very good this year, and I think he has a little bit of a future as a second, third round pick in the NFL. At number 10, top 10 games to watch this weekend. These are ones that I would love to watch. If I could watch all 10 of these games at the same time, I definitely would. Another rivalry, SEC versus SEC, the battle line rivalry between a top 10 ranked Missouri Tigers team and an Arkansas Razorbacks team that is on a little bit of a winning streak lately, and they've been playing a lot better football. KJ Jefferson had an abysmal start to the year, and now, after just a few weeks, he's turned it all the way around, and he's looking like he could have another season of this very consistent 2,000-plus passing yards streak he's been on for each of the past 3 years. Either way, let's get down to business. Missouri is favored by 9, 71.3% chance of winning. Will they win and finish off what has been an incredible season in Fayetteville?
Yeah, the thing about this Arkansas team at home, they're 3-4 with losses to BYU, Texas A&M, and they had a very boring 7-3 loss to Mississippi State. Probably the worst game, or definitely the worst game KJ Jefferson has played in his college career up to this point. And just 2 weeks ago, they lost to Auburn at home 48-10. And with the way this Auburn team has been playing this year, that's just a terrible loss. Their only home wins were FIU, Kent State, and Western Carolina, who are all pretty bad teams. But Missouri on the road has been really good. Their only loss was to the number 1 team in the country, Georgia, and it was only by 9 points, 30-21. But the other two road games were wins over Vanderbilt and Kentucky back when Kentucky was ranked. So that Kentucky game is a pretty good win, and they won by 17. But I like Missouri a lot this year. I like them being in the top 10. They've been a really fun team to watch. Even with the good teams that they're expected to lose, they make it close. Vanderbilt and Kentucky back when Kentucky was ranked. So that Kentucky game is a pretty good win, and they won by 17. But I like Missouri a lot this year. I like them being in the top 10. They've been a really fun team to watch. Even with the good teams that they're expected to lose, they make it close, at least to the end. So with that being said, I think Missouri wins pretty easily here, 45-21.
Yeah, if you look at every single college football team and you see just go over to ESPN, look at the passing leader, the rushing leader, and the receiving leader, and you look at all of them combined, most teams, they'll have maybe one guy that's like, you're like, oh, that's pretty good. Maybe they'll have a quarterback receiver duo or a running back that just gets the ball all the time. Not Missouri. Cody Schrader, their running back, has been very, very good, especially as of late. The senior has been balling out all season long. He's got 1,200 yards. Luther Burden was number 1 in the nation in receiving yards at some point. He's got 1,100 receiving yards. Then Brady Cook, the quarterback, has taken one of the biggest steps of any quarterback in the SEC in a long, long time. He was up in my Heisman watch at one point. But meanwhile, Arkansas has been playing some better football. They haven't been good. They haven't been as good as we thought. But KJ Jefferson has been making things work with that offense. But the thing is, they don't have an offensive line at Arkansas. It's been abysmal all year long. Just watching one game, Texas A&M versus Arkansas, just every other play was just KJ Jefferson with multiple defensive linemen in his face. I think that's what's going to lose this game for Arkansas. And I've got Missouri winning in a rivalry game 38-24. Moving on to the best group of 5 matchup this weekend. That is the UTSA Roadrunners, new members in the American Athletic, against the best team in the American Athletic Conference. That is the 23rd ranked Tulane Green Waves. Tulane, they're favored by 3.5 with a 59.2% chance of winning. These are 2 of the 3 best group of 5 quarterbacks in my preseason quarterback rankings. Who you got winning this one, Isaac? UTSA finishing out their first year strong in a new conference, or Tulane making their way to a conference championship and maybe a New Year's Six bowl?
Yeah, so with this year, both teams have not won or have not lost a game since September. So they both are on some pretty good hot streaks, hot winning streaks. And with Tulane, they being at home, they've been just so good at home. Their only loss was to Ole Miss, who is currently ranked number 12 in the country. And they've been a really good team this year. So that's not a bad. And they were in it for a while until the end. What UTSA needs to do is they need to contain Makai Hughes, the Tulane running back. He has over 1,000 yards, 6 touchdowns, over 200 carries. So if they contain him, I think they have a really, really good chance at winning. But I don't think they'll be able to contain him enough. So I think Tulane comes out on top 34-31.
Yeah, UTSA, they have lost 2 very, very good wide receivers in the transfer portal this recent offseason, one of those being Zachary Franklin. And it has really been a nice awakening for the rushing attack to step up so well in place of the absence of the wide receivers that were named first-team All-American a year ago. First-team All-Conference, I mean. Either way, Tulane is so good. Michael Pratt came back from injury, no problem. He has been a 4-year starter, probably one of the best Tulane quarterbacks ever. Anyways, I think it's going to be a shootout. I think it'll be a high-scoring offensive game. I've got Tulane winning this one, 34-28. You might be watching this one at the same time as you're listening to this episode, as it is a Thanksgiving game, the Egg Bowl between Ole Miss and Mississippi State. There is no higher hatred rivalry game you could argue, in the SEC than Ole Miss and Mississippi State. Ole Miss, they hate the Cowbells. They hate everything about Mississippi State. And Mississippi State, they hate everything about Ole Miss. They hate the powder blue. They hate the red. Jackson Dart transferred in from USC. He's been great ever since. And on the other side, Will Rogers is healthy. Jaquavius Marks is healthy. Neither of those guys were healthy 2 weeks ago against Texas A&M. Either way, Ole Miss favored by 10 with an 82% chance of winning. This should be an exciting game to watch. The only college football game this Thursday. Who you got winning, Isaac?
Yeah, so when you think Thanksgiving, you think football, and people watch the Cowboys or watch the Lions. Well, whenever this game is on, I always turn it on. It's always a fun one. No matter how good the teams are, it's always a fun game. It's always a good game. And I think this one will be no different. Mississippi State has only really had one decent win at home, and that was against Arizona. All the losses that they've had at home were all blowouts. They lost to Kentucky, Bama, and LSU. So they've had some pretty tough opponents at home and have not played great against most of them. But Ole Miss on the road has been really good. They lost to Georgia and Bama, which are both top 10 teams, number 1, number 8. So those are some really good losses. And with the win over to Tulane and Auburn, which are the Tulane game is a good game to win on the road. So with, as you said, Jackson Dart has been amazing this year. 19 touchdowns to 5 interceptions, and he's probably going to have 3,000 yards after tomorrow. And with Will Rogers being healthy, he's had when he's healthy, he's been really good with 12 touchdowns compared to just 4 interceptions. And like you mentioned, Mark is a really good running back. He, even with only 100 carries, he's had over 500 yards. And when he's healthy, he can be really good. So with that being said, I think Ole Miss will pull this one out on the road, 41-27.
Yeah, as I said, this is going to be a high-scoring game. These are two offenses that this Mississippi State offense is not the same one that went out against Texas A&M and got absolutely blown out. They don't have Chris Parson or Mike Wright out there. Will Rogers is the real deal, and he seems to be fully healthy, and so does Jaquavius Marks. Throw in LaDietrich Griffin, who's a very good wide receiver, really underrated, just hasn't had a healthy Will Rogers or a good quarterback to back him up to really put up some monster stats this year. But either way, Ole Miss has been so good this year. They are very, very deep at the wide receiver position. Quinshon Judkins had one of the best freshman seasons for a running back we've seen since Jonathan Taylor back in 2017 with Wisconsin, which is just a running back factory. Again, Ole Miss, they're really deep at quarterback, really deep at wide receiver. They've got a lot of good names. Lane Kiffin has been there for a little while now and is starting to show that he has really built a good squad down there in Oxford. I think it's going to be a decent game. It always is, but the scores, it's going to be in Ole Miss's favor, 45-24, as they run all over the Mississippi State defense. Next up, you got my Texas A&M Aggies, who haven't won a game on the road in over 2 years, and it's going to be a tough one, going into one of the most hostile environments in all of college football, and that is Baton Rouge, Tiger Stadium, Death Valley. It's a loud place. It's not going to be an easy game to win for Texas A&M. They're 11.5-point underdogs. My Aggies only have a 31% chance of winning, and they're going up against the best player stat-wise in college football this year. Who you got winning this one, Isaac? SEC rivalry matchup.
Yeah, one thing I noticed was LSU at home has been undefeated, while A&M is winless on the road. So they're trying to get that first win outside of College Station. LSU's offense has been amazing this year with Jane Daniels. He's been probably the best player in college football this year, as you mentioned, leading the team in passing yards and rushing yards. This offense has had 46.8 points per game on average this year. And they're playing a really good A&M Aggie defense, who has allowed an average of 19.5 points per game, this is really good offense, really good defense, which I think that if Jane Daniels is contained and A&M can score with this offense, then A&M will have a great chance at winning. With that being said, I do not think that will happen, so I think that your Aggies go down in Baton Rouge 38-20.
Yeah, I had the pleasure of attending this most recent game, Senior Day in College Station, and seeing outside the stadium the list of recent major award winners at Texas A&M. Obviously, you had Trevor Knight 7 years ago winning the Best Leadership Award. I forget what it's called, but they really need another guy up there, and this is their first chance in a while with Egerin Cooper as a semi-finalist for the Dick Butkus Award. He's a 3-year starter, but he has never been this dominant. No linebacker has more TFLs in the SEC. He's currently number 1 overall in TFLs in the SEC. This Texas A&M defense only ranks behind James Madison. They've got the secondary has not been good at some points. They just got cooked all game by Tyler Van Dyke and Xavier Restrepo against Miami. That was not a good showing. They gave up so many points in that game. All night long, the corners were getting toasted. That being said, this A&M offense has an incredible wide receiving core, but it won't be able to compete with LSU's wide receiver core. Malik Neighbors, number one wide receiver yardage-wise in the country. Brian Thomas, number one wide receiver touchdowns-wise in the country. Mason Taylor, you could argue, is the most underrated tight end out there. He has one of the best balances of blocking and receiving talent in the SEC. And yes, that is in the same conference as Brock Bowers. And don't even get me started on Jaden Daniels. Dude's already doubled his touchdown total from last year, 1,000 plus rushing, almost 4,000 passing. If he loses this game, his Heisman hopes are over. If he wins it and gets into a good bowl game, I don't see why he shouldn't win the Heisman. Lamar Jackson won it when they were 9-4. He put up similar rushing stats, but nothing like what Jaden Daniels has done passing this year. I've got LSU 31-21 against my Aggies. Big win for Jaden Daniels, keeping his Heisman hopes alive. The SEC rivalries don't stop as Alabama goes on the road against Auburn in the Iron Bowl, the biggest rivalry in all of college football. Auburn, they're just in pieces after a terrible loss to New Mexico State, and it wasn't close, 31-10. They were getting picked apart by Diego Pavia, and now they've got Jalen Milroe coming into town, Jace McClellan, Jermaine Burton, Isaiah Bond. This offense is so deep, and that's why they're 14-point favorites with an 85% chance of winning. Isaac, who you got winning this one? A shocker in Jordan Hare or another win for the Crimson Tide?
Yeah, I've said from the beginning of the season that I said at the beginning of the season that I said that Auburn was going to come into or that Alabama was going to come into Jordan Hare and get shocked by the Tigers. With Alabama, they've been undefeated on the road. Auburn coming off of an embarrassing 31-10 loss to New Mexico State at home. I think my prediction from the beginning of the year was very much wrong, and I think Bama wins this one with ease, 37-14.
Yeah, like you said, not only would it be a shocker if Auburn pulled this one off, it would be a shocker if they lost by anything better than 31-10. Like that's the bare minimum right there. New Mexico State just came in and beat you 31-10. Now you got Alabama. Like, you just lost by 21 points to the team that couldn't even beat UMass at home. It's just terrible timing for this Auburn team. Now got Alabama winning this one, 41-17. Moving on to one of the Tobacco Road rivalries. It's the Carolina State rivalry. North Carolina going on the road against a ranked NC State team. The tables have flipped in this one as UNC has been ranked all year long. They've had some of the most disappointing losses in all of college football. Drake May, you could say he's been disappointing, but he's still been a great quarterback. And NC State, they've had some sneaky wins. They've been surprising with one of the toughest home schedules in all of college football this year. They're 2.5-point underdogs. North Carolina's got a 62% chance of winning this one. Who do you think comes out on top, Isaac?
Yeah, like you said, this North Carolina team started off 6-0 before getting stunned at home by Virginia, followed up by a loss on the road against Georgia Tech. And since then, they've only had one loss now to Clemson. And they had a win against Campbell and a really good win in double overtime against their rival Duke. So this is a good team led by one of the best quarterbacks in the league, Drake May, who has almost 3,400 passing yards with 22 touchdowns and only 7 interceptions. He was expected to be the second best quarterback in the draft this year. behind Caleb Williams. And I think that's still going to be the case. He's just really good. Has been putting this offense on his back, and even in their hard times, he still follows it up with good wins. And Kevin Concepcion, he's had 57 receptions for 636 yards and 8 touchdowns. He's been really good this year. Same amount of receiving touchdowns as quarterback has passing touchdowns. But Brennan Armstrong also has 522 yards on the ground and 6 rushing touchdowns, which is crazy. He has 7 more passing attempts than he does rushing. So they're going to have to control him on both sides of that. So with that being said, North Carolina's only road win was Pitt. So they're not a great road team. And NC State's only home losses were to Notre Dame and Louisville, which have both been really good teams this year. And UNC's offense has 38 points per game on average this year, compared to NC State's defense, who had 20 points per game allowed on average this year. So with that being said, my final score prediction is NC State winning on a last-second field goal, 31-30.
Man, yeah, you were saying about Brennan Armstrong. They were rocking with MJ Morris a few weeks ago. Morris made the controversial decision to sit out the rest of his sophomore year at redshirt, leaving things back in the hands of the sixth-year senior Brennan Armstrong, who has showed up. He hasn't been great passing. Like in 2021, he threw for almost 5,000 yards in just 11 games, and it's been downhill from there. But he's brought it in the run game, and he's done just enough for NC State to have a really good season. But come on, man. Amarian Hampton has been one of the best running backs in all of college football this year, possibly the most surprising out of them all. We've had a lot of them this year, in a class that had a lot of returning running backs that had success in 2022. We've had just as many guys that have come out of the blue and had a ton of success. So you look at these two offenses, North Carolina has such a clear advantage that even though that NC State defense, they're only giving up 20 points a game, I've got to give it to the Tar Heels. 28-24, UNC gets a big win over their big rivals. Here's a big one. This might be the highest it's ever been up on this list, ever, on Rivalry Week, and that's the battle for the Governor's Cup. Kentucky and Louisville, you look at all the games that the SEC plays against the ACC on Rivalry Week, and you'd probably say that this one is the least entertaining on a year-by-year basis. But not this year. Louisville is currently ranked 10th in the nation. Their only loss was to Pitt, which is just a terrible loss. But it was on the road early on in the year. Jack Plummer has settled in to this Louisville team alongside his former coach, played at Purdue for 3 seasons. Kentucky, on the other hand, they've got another transfer who has settled very well into his team. It took a second for Devin Leary, who started off cold, but he has been great. You look at that game we just picked, NC State, Devin Leary transferred in from there. If they still had him, they would win, no doubt. Ray Davis has been another good transfer. Louisville's favored by 7.5, 74% chance of winning. This one is going to be a good one. Who you got, Isaac?
Yeah, one thing I noticed is Louisville, like you said, their only loss was at Pitt. It was a 17-point loss, so it wasn't a good loss at all. Plummer still threw for 350 yards that game, so he had his second best game in terms of passing yards on the season. And they've been undefeated at home all year. And so I think that's going to be a huge factor. The thing about this Louisville team reminds me a lot about TCU last year. They were only a one-loss team, but a lot of their games, even against the bad teams, were really close, and they had to just find ways to win. Opening week, they only beat Georgia Tech by 5. A few weeks later, they only beat Indiana by a touchdown. They beat NC State by 3 points. And then just a few weeks ago, Virginia, one of the worst teams in the ACC, if not the worst, 31-24, barely got out of that one. And last week at Miami, 38-31. So they've had some close games, but this team just keeps finding ways to win. As you said, Leary has been huge. 20 touchdowns compared to just 9 interceptions. While Plummer has 19 touchdowns to 10 interceptions. So Leary's been playing a little bit better football than Plummer in terms of those. But Louisville having a chance at making the playoffs if everybody that they need to lose loses, and if they can beat Kentucky and then beat Florida State in the ACC championship game, they have a really good chance of making the college football playoff. So with that being said, I'm going to take Louisville winning at home by 10, 34-24.
Yeah, another thing I want to add on to that is the running backs. First, Ray Davis got off to an incredible start this year. The way he just picked apart that Florida defense early on this season was nothing like he had done at Troy or at Vanderbilt. And he really has been an incredible running back after they had Chris Rodriguez. Being said, possibly the most improved team in all of college football is this Louisville team with Jawar Jordan, who transferred in from Syracuse a few years ago, where he had played because of some guys having COVID. He put himself on the map, but he's been so good. I called it with this guy. He was somebody I had shortlisted at the beginning of the year where I said, this guy could have a big game. Again, down the stretch, he has really improved on his receiving skills this season. I really like a running back that can come out of the backfield and make a big catch. And Jawar Jordan is one of those guys. He and Ashton Genty were 1-2 in total yards from scrimmage for a running back for a long time. So that being said, we've talked about his offense. This is going to be a very, very high scoring game. And I've got the Cardinals 38-30. The difference is Devin Leary won't be able to finish out his drives in the red zone. Jack Plummer wins in the deep ball. I've got Louisville winning this one big and finding their way to an ACC championship. At this point, you're probably going to be watching every minute of these 3 games if you're watching this podcast. First one, the Sunshine Showdown between ranked 5 Florida State. Their season was perfect. Everything that could have possibly gone their way went their way. They may have missed out on Keon Coleman and Johnny Wilson for a week or two, their top 2 receivers, but they came right back. And then it struck. Jordan Travis, he's out for the year. Just really tragic stuff for Florida State. Enter Tate Rodemaker, the junior redshirt. We don't really know too much about this guy. He comes in, has a big comeback win over North Alabama, and scores over 50 points for them. 6.5-point favorites in the Swamp. What does Rodemaker do in his first game? Does he finish out what Jordan Travis perfected and go 12-0? Or do the Gators go bowling with a big home win?
Yeah, as you mentioned, this new backup we're just really going in this game blind because we have no idea how he played. Yes, he scored over 50 points, but he also has a really good offense, and it was against North Alabama. Being down 13-3 and then finishing at 58-13 is pretty promising now, no matter who you're playing. But Florida has had a pretty rough year. They're on a 4-game losing streak right now. Even though 3 of the teams are ranked, it's still not a great streak with a loss to Arkansas thrown in there. So that was their last home game, and it was a loss to Arkansas, as this game is in Florida. Florida State, without Jordan Travis, though, might help Florida a little bit. But Florida State's defense has allowed an average of 17 points per game, while Florida's defense allows an average of 28. So the Florida defense is not good, while Florida State's defense is amazing. And even without their starting quarterback, I still think the Seminoles find a way to get it done and win pretty handily. So I have to have the Seminoles here 34-18.
Yeah, Graham Mertz, the quarterback from Florida, came in, had the resources to be a good quarterback at Wisconsin, and he wasn't bad. He obviously threw for about maybe just less than 20 touchdowns a year, maybe just over 10 picks. This year, though, he's taken a huge step forward. Graham Mertz has been another surprising player. If Graham Mertz was on a team that had a winning record and that was like top 15, top 10, he would be in my Heisman watch. He's been that good. I like Montrell Johnson Jr. at running back. He's in his second year with the Gators. He was on that 13-1 ULL team 2 years ago. Trevor Etienne is really good. Ricky Pearsall has been one of the best wide receivers. But Florida State, they've got, obviously, Florida's got the quarterback advantage, but Florida State's got it everywhere else. Trey Benson at running back has been incredible. Again, Lawrence Toafili is a great backup. Keon Coleman, Johnny Wilson, Jaheim Bell, all great receivers, and this defense is going to be what keeps them in the game, and it's going to be what wins them the game. The offense is going to do whatever they can. Tate Rodemaker obviously is going to limit that, but he's still going to be really good. He still would start on most teams, and that's why I've got Florida State. Ironically, you said the Florida's giving up 28 points, Florida State's giving up 17 per game. I've got Florida State winning 28-17. Moving on, the second best game this weekend, on Friday, the Civil War. Another one, Oregon State's conference list next year. Oregon's going to the Big 12. The kind of hatred that's going to be in this game is really, really high. DJ Uyunglele transferred in from Clemson. He's had a career season. Bo Nix has been near perfect this year. The Beavers and the Ducks going at it in Autzen Stadium, Eugene, Oregon. Oregon's final game in the regular season as a Pac-12 team, 13.5-point favorites, 81% chance of winning against a top 20 team in the nation. That is impressive. So, Isaac, who you got, Ducks or Beavers? Can Oregon State spoil Oregon's season?
Yeah, as you said, Oregon has had just an amazing year. This is probably the best they've done since at least 2014. Bo Nix is probably second or third in the Heisman voting right now. He has over 3,500 passing yards with 35 touchdowns and only 2 picks thrown. That is an insane stat line. 35 to 2 is just crazy. And this offense from Oregon has been just really good. But what I saw, what I've always thought, Uyunglele has been a little bit underrated. People at Clemson were hanging around saying he's a horrible quarterback, even though he was still winning 9 or 8 games a year. And I was like, no, he's a good quarterback. It's just because he's at Clemson, they have a better quarterback. He goes to Oregon State and shows exactly what I was talking about. He goes to Oregon State and he's played the same one that he always has, but it's just because he's turned this program into a top 20 team. This is the best season Oregon State's had, maybe ever, or at least in a long time. And with his 20 touchdowns compared to six INTs, I think it's going to be a pretty close. It's going to be a pretty big offensive game. That is until I realized how good Oregon's defense had been. They've allowed 6.7 points per game on average, and they've averaged 46.5 points per game. With those team stats right there, you cannot beat that. With Oregon, they've been playing amazing at home. They've had all their home games have been double-digit wins, except for a 9-point win over the reigning Heisman winner in USC. But with that all being said, Oregon's played so well since their one loss at Washington on a missed field goal at the end of the game. So I have Oregon winning pretty big, 38-21.
Yeah, the way Oregon has been blowing out teams outside of Washington this year has been very impressive. I love Bo Nix. He's been so good. He's the most accurate quarterback in college football. He's the most aware quarterback in college football. If Bo Nix had 14 rushing touchdowns like he did last year, this year, I'd put him ahead of Jaden Daniels. But for now, he's my number 2. Bucky Irving is a great running back. Troy Franklin just broke the school record for single-season receiving yards, and that's pretty big considering they brought in some big-name transfers like Tez Johnson from Troy and another guy from Alabama. So they've been really good. They've been, like you said, the best they've been since that national championship appearance back in 2014. On the other side of the ball, Oregon State, they've been one of the most surprising teams the past 2 years. After being just mediocre for the last part of the 2010s, they've come out screaming into the top 25 each and every week these past 2 seasons. And though it's going to end with a 2-game losing streak, I'm picking Oregon. Oregon State's they're going to end up with a great season. Looking forward, it's a little scary. They're going to be conferenceless. But right now, the Ducks have been so good. 38-24. This Oregon State defense is not going to stop Oregon. Their O-line will probably give DJU time, Damian Martinez, time to score those 24 points. But Oregon, their offense is not going to be stopped. Which leads us to the game that everyone's considered to be the best game in college football this year. There's a reason it's called the game. And that is between the 2 best teams in the Big Ten, the number 2 team and the number 3 team in the nation. The winner of this I'd be shocked if the winner did not move up to number 1 in the college football playoff poll. Realistically, they'd probably move down after beating Iowa if Georgia is able to pull off a win. But Ohio State and Michigan, these 2 teams are 11-0 and 11-0 coming into this week for the 2nd year in a row. Last year, Michigan won with ease in Columbus, in the Horseshoe. Now, the Buckeyes go to the Big House. But Jim Harbaugh's not on the other side of the field. There's been a lot of stuff swirling around about Michigan, the whole cheating thing. It hasn't gotten in the way of their season. They're 11-0. 3-point favorites, 55% chance of winning. J.J. McCarthy and Kyle McCord. Who you got winning this one, Isaac? The biggest game this season. Everyone's been talking about it. The hatred will be settled in this one. Michigan's on a 2-game win streak.
Yeah, like you said, these are 2 of the top 3 teams in college football. This is the biggest game of the year in all of college football, and this is something that Michigan and Ohio State fans have marked their calendar probably since February. or since they were both eliminated from the college football playoff. But one thing that I have to point out is how easy Michigan's schedule has been this year. The only two games that were close were the only two decent teams, Penn State and Maryland. Well, I did have Rutgers beating Maryland, which they blew out Rutgers, but that was at home against Rutgers, not on the road against Maryland. But I think, other than that Penn State game, this has any team could have at least 8 wins with their schedule. It's just horrible how easy they make their schedule, and going up into the Ohio State game. But with that being said, this Ohio State versus Michigan game has been these last 3 years, or counting this year, and then the last 2 years, this has really defined their season. Last year, not so much because Ohio State still was able to squeak into the college football playoff, but this decides basically who's Big Ten championship, or who's Big Ten champions, and who will be in the college football playoff. I think that Marvin Harrison and Blake Corum this year have just been amazing. I think that they're going to be the difference makers in this game. They're both going to have a really big games. With Blake Corum, almost 900 rushing yards and 180 carries for 20 touchdowns. He has more touchdowns than their quarterback does, which is just crazy to me. If he didn't get injured last year, he very possibly would have been in New York for the Heisman ceremony. And then Marvin Harrison, he's one of the best wide receivers in college football history, if not the best. He's just really good. Over 1,000 yards, 13 touchdowns. He's one of the best I've ever seen. And then another Michigan player that I think will be a huge difference maker is Roman Wilson. He's shown some flashes these past years, but this year he's been really good. 10 touchdowns for 612 yards. And then the two quarterbacks in this game, Kyle McCord, J.J. McCarthy, both have been on top of a bunch of people's Heisman candidates all year. Both over 2,300 passing yards this year. Both have at least 18 touchdowns, and they both have 4 interceptions, which is not bad at all. So I think it really is going to come down to these offenses who can get their stars going quicker. And then Henderson, too, he's 6 away from 800 yards, and he has 10 touchdowns on the year. It's not like Corum numbers, but he's still really good. And he's going to be his difference maker. But with that being said, these two teams in points per game, or in allowing points per game, are the top 2 defenses in the country. I think Michigan has like 9 points per game, even though they've had a really easy schedule. And then Ohio State has had like 9.8 points per game allowed, which is crazy. With that being said, there's going to be a really good game. And I think Ohio State goes to the Big House, which is going to be rocking. And they show why they're ranked ahead of Michigan, and they take the 31-27.
Yeah. Like you said, these two quarterbacks are very, very talented. The touchdown to interception ratio on both these guys is pretty crazy. But the thing about J.J. McCarthy is he could have gone this entire season without throwing the ball, and Michigan would still be 11-0, probably 10-1. The thing about the Big Ten is Michigan and Penn State both play a 2-game schedule pretty much every year. Ohio State, they mixed in Notre Dame this year, which was a tough game, especially on the road, and they showed up in that one. They had Wisconsin on the road. They showed up in that one. They had Rutgers on the road, who's been good this year. Michigan had them at home. The thing is, J.J. McCarthy could have gone this entire year without throwing a pass, and they still would be in this top 10, in this top 5 maybe. That's how good Blake Corum is. And you remember Donovan Edwards, who everyone had in their top 5 running backs in all the college football list, even though he's a backup. That's how deep this Michigan backfield is. Donovan Edwards, he took it coast to coast last year in a crowd silencer in the Horseshoe, had a career game, helped J.J. McCarthy and Michigan blow Ohio State out of the water. On the other side of the field, Marvin Harrison Jr. is still in the Heisman race as a wide receiver. He is in a lot of people's top 5. I think I have him at number 6, but he's been incredible. He's had another great year to follow up last year where he filled in for an injured Jackson Smith and Jigba. And then again, Trevion Henderson and Mayan Williams have each had injury stints this year, but they're both healthy right now. This is a great O-line for both these teams. Both these teams have multiple players that will be going into the NFL next year on these O-lines. Multiple players going into the NFL on these defenses. And another big difference is Jim Harbaugh won't be on the sidelines for Michigan. He wasn't out there for the first part of this year, but that was against UNLV, Hawaii, Rutgers. Again, Michigan, we really still don't know what kind of a team they are, and really the Penn State game was very impressive. But they could go out here and they could win 42-10, or they could lose 42-10. My pick, though, is that these teams are evenly matched. They're going to go back and forth. It's going to be a great game. Nobody's going to know who the winner is until there's 1 second left on the clock. I got Ohio State picking up a game-winning field goal. Kyle McCord going a deep pass to Marvin Harrison Jr. to get him in field goal range. And then the Buckeyes win it 31-28, advance on to the Big Ten Championship, after that to the College Football Playoff. The Michigan Wolverines are stunned in the big house as over 110,000 will be silenced by these Ohio State Buckeyes. They're going to win it, and they're going to cap off an incredible 2023 season. With that, that's going to be it for this episode. Thank you all for tuning in. It's been an incredible episode. Isaac, thank you so much for coming on. I mean, you're the first guest that's ever been on the show. Hopefully the first of many. I hope to have you back in this one. Rivalry week is the best week in all of college football. It's got that electricity, that anticipation of week 1, and it's got the matchups and the hatred that no other week has. With that, thank you so much for listening. I'll see you in the next one, which will probably be next week for conference championships. One more big thank you to Isaac. See you later.